your site components auth form right here, and inside you can now import session hook. So right here at the top, write const session is equal use session from next-auth/react, the same library where we imported sign in function. Great. And now just above toggle variant, I'm gonna write a use effect right here, in which I'm going to check if the current session status is authenticated. So if session (status is equal to authenticated, in that case, I'm gonna, for now, just console log authenticated like this, and make sure you pass in the session (status like this. All right, and I'm just gonna expand on my browser a little bit so I can open the console, and you can see that I have a console log authenticated here. Perhaps you might not have that if you're not logged in. But basically what we want to do is, if user is authenticated and tries to visit the login screen, we want to redirect them to /users. Great. So before we do the redirection part, what I want to do is I want to go into my app right here, and I want to create a new folder inside called users like this. And inside users, I'm going to create a new file page.tsx like that. I'm going to name it users. And I'm just going to return a div which says hello users like that. Great. And now we can go back into auth form, and just below this session you can add const router is equal use router. Just make sure you do not import that from next/router. You have to import it from next/navigation. So import use router from next/navigation like this. So make sure you do not accidentally import it from router. This is a common autocomplete, but that is in old version of Next. In the Next 13, we are using next/navigation like that. And now that we have our router, instead of console log authenticated, we can write router.push /users like this. Great. And make sure you add the router to the dependency array. Perfect. And now if I try and refresh this page, you can see that I'm redirected to hello users. Great job. All right. And what I'm going to add here in my users page, so I'm going to go back into my users page right here, and I'm going to add a little button so that we can safely log out. So instead of hello users, we're going to have a button here, which is going to, for now, just say log out. And on click, we're going to do an arrow function, which is going to call sign out from next-auth/react, and just make sure you execute it like this in an arrow function. So just a very simple button with an on click, which calls an arrow function, which executes this sign out like this. Great. Yeah, and just, of course, make sure you wrap this in use client at the top so you don't get any errors. Great. And now we have this button. Doesn't really look like a button, but once we click log out, well, we'll steer at the users page. That is because we have not protected this route. But if you go back to localhost 3000, you can see that now we are not redirected back because we are successfully logged out. Great. So what I want to do now is I want to go back into my auth form, and I want to use this router.push/users in some other places. So first thing I want to do is, after we successfully log in, instead of just having a toast success logged in, I also want to use router.push/users. So once I successfully log in, I also want to redirect to /users. And also, once I register, I immediately want to log in. So what I can do here is call .then like this, and I can just use sign in credentials data like that. So I'm immediately signed in once I register. So we're going to test both of that now. So first I'm going to try and log in. Actually, I'm going to try and register because I removed all of my users, if you remember. So I'm going to create a new user right here. And if everything is correct, I should immediately be redirected to slash users after this has been completed. And there we go. I am back in slash users. Perfect. I'm going to log out again. Nothing's going to happen. So I have to manually go back to localhost 3000. And we confirm that the register works. Let's try if the login works as well. So I click sign in. And there we go. I'm logged in and I'm redirected to users. Great. And now I want to protect this users route right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to close everything up right here. And in my root folder, so not inside app, but in my root folder, I'm going to create a new file called middleware.ts like that. And first I'm going to import without from next-out/middleware like this. And I'm going to export default without. I'm going to open an object inside of its function. I'm going to write pages, sign in, and I'm going to give it a sign in page of slash because this is our sign in page. Localhost 3000 slash is our initial login page. And now I'm just going to write a config which is going to protect our routes. So I'm going to write export const config matcher. I'm going to open an array and I'm going to write slash users slash path asterisk it at the end. So even though we are not going to have any nested routes inside our users, this is a good practice so you can protect all of the routes inside of the users. So this is also going to cover things like slash users slash Antonio slash messages, for example. And that is exactly what we want. Perfect. All right. So now, just to confirm that everything is okay, I'm going to shut down my application and I'm going to run it again, just in case this middleware is not reflected with hot reload. So just click refresh again, wait a couple of seconds for everything to load. Great. And now I'm going to try again and click log out now. And our middleware should automatically redirect us to the login screen. Great job. And I'm going to try and go back again. Actually, while I'm not logged in, I'm going to try and manually enter slash users so you can see that we protected that route now. You can see I'm immediately returned back here. And if I try and log in that case, everything should work just fine. There we go. I'm logged in and I'm in the users. Perfect. Great job. So now I'm going to go back into my app folder, into users page.tsx right here, and I'm going to start writing some code here instead. So for now, I'm going to remove this logout button because we're going to use that in a sidebar later. So go ahead and write a div, give it a class name of hidden lg block lgpl-80 and h-full. So on small devices, this is going to be hidden. On large, it's going to be a block. And on large, it's also going to have a padding left of 80, which is 20 rem or 320 pixels. And it's going to have a full height. So why do I move this by the left by so much? Well, because this is going to be a space for our sidebar and for some other items which you're going to see in the future. And inside of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a new component, empty state, like this. And if I save, of course, I'm going to get an error because that does not exist. So let's go into our app folder, into our components, and in the root of our components, create a new file, empty state.tsx, like that. Let's just fix the error. So I'm just going to return a div which says empty, like this. And I'm going to go back into my users page and I'm going to import this from /components empty state. And I'm going to save this file and the error should go away. I'm going to refresh one more time. Okay, we're getting some errors. Let's just fix that. All right, so in order to fix this error, we have to remove the use client from the top of our page in users page.tsx. So just make sure you move use client and remove sign out because we're not going to need them. And then if you refresh, the error should go away. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and you should see the empty. If you cannot see the empty, it means you're zoomed out too much in, because this is only visible on large devices. You can see that this entire space on the left is empty for us because this is where we're going to put our sidebar and some other lists we will have. Great. So now let's go back into our empty state and let's start styling it. So I'm going to give it a class name of px-4 py-10 smpx-6, lgpx-8, h-full, flex, justify, dash center, items dash center, and vg dash gray dash 100. And you can see how we have this little effect where the empty section is grayed out. Great. Now I'm going to go inside of this div, and I'm going to write another div, which is going to have a class name of text dash center, items dash center, flex, and flex dash call. So just make sure it's text center, item center, flex, and flex dash call, like that. And inside I'm going to have an h3, which is going to say select a chat or start a new conversation, like that. Great. And now we have this text right here, and I'm just going to give this a class name of the following: empty-2 text-2xl, font-semi-bold, and text-gray-900, like this. Great. And that covers our empty state. We're going to reuse this empty state a couple of times in our application, so it's great that we finished it so fast in this video. Great. Now I'm going to close everything, and I'm just going to recap what we did. So I'm going to expand my code a little bit, make sure you have all the changes that I do. So we added a new folder called users, and we have a page.tsx inside of it, which imports the empty state and just returns it. We had an error because we put use client here at the top. Perhaps if I add it again, it's going to show again. So just confirm that this is that error which you had. Yes, so that shows the hydration error. So just make sure you remove use client from the users page. We added that because we used it for the logout thing, but we do not need it. And if you're not seeing the empty message, that means you have to expand your screen or zoom out if you're too zoomed in. Great job. And now we're going to go ahead and create our sidebar component. So let's go and close everything, and let's go into our app folder, into our users, and create a new file called layout.tsx, like this. And first, let's do export default async function users layout, like this. And you can just open it and return like this. The prop it's going to take is children, and you can just easily add the props for that. So open another object, children, react.react node, like that. Great. And now just open this function, and for now you can just return a div and paste the children inside like this. Great. Okay, now we have this little bugged out view, but don't worry, we're gonna fix that soon. So what have we done here? Well, we defined a common layout for all of our users' routes. So every route inside this user is going to share this exact layout, which is different from the root layout that we have. But the root layout is also shared, of course, but the specific design we want is in the layout of our users page right here. Great. The reason we created this as an asynchronous function is because in the future, we are going to use this server component to fetch users directly from the database. Great. So let's give this a class name of h-full, just to fix this bugged out view. There we go. Now it's much better. All right. And now I'm going to wrap this entire thing inside a sidebar. Now, sidebar does not exist yet, so of course, we are going to get an error. So just save the file, and we get an error. So let's go and fix that. Let's go into app, into components, and let's create a new folder called sidebar, like this. And inside of that, you're going to create a new file, capital sidebar.tsx. So capital S, sidebar.tsx, like that. Great. And inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to write asynchronous function sidebar. Again, it's going to accept children. And let's just define the type of children to react.react node, like this. And let's just return this function. So return. Let's just wrap this div right here. Let's give it a class name of h-full again. And let's just render the children one more time. Great. And now let's go back into users, layout.tsx. Let's just import this sidebar component. So I'm going to go to the top right here. I'm going to import sidebar from components / sidebar like this. And let's just fix this error. So sidebar is not a module. Of course, we have not exported it. So just in the sidebar component, make sure you write export default sidebar like this. All right. Now, let's just confirm that this is okay. All right. So we get this error that sidebar cannot be used as a JSX component. Why? Well, because our sidebar is an asynchronous function. So the way GitHub recommends fixing this is by adding a comment here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. You can either write @ts-ignore, or a better way would be @ts-expect-error server component. So we wrote this special tag which fixes our TypeScript error, and basically when they fix this error, it's going to alert us that we can remove this comment then. So GitHub issues recommend doing it this way, so that's what I want to do it this way, and that fixes our error nicely. Great. Now let's go back into our components, sidebar.tsx again, and let's continue developing here. So besides wrapping the children inside a div, I'm also going to wrap it inside a main element like this. So we are semantically correct. And I'm also going to give it a class name of LG, PL-20, and H-full like this. So you can see we moved our empty state even a little bit further. It's all going to make sense very soon. Great. Now inside of here, let's create another component, desktop sidebar, like this. If you save, of course, we're going to get an error. So let's go ahead and fix that. In our sidebar folder in components, create a new file, desktop sidebar.tsx, like this. And let's just fix this. So desktop sidebar, return a div, desktop sidebar, like that. And let's go back into our sidebar folder, sidebar component, and let's just import this neighborly component. We can just use /desktop sidebar, and you can see how it's positioned here exactly where we expect it to be positioned. Great. All right, so let's continue with developing our desktop sidebar. To continue, we're going to need to create a couple of hooks. So open your sidebar right here, and in the app folder, create a new folder called hooks. Inside of there, you're going to create a new file called useConversation.ts. We're going to need this hook in the future as well, and we're also going to need this in our sidebar. So go ahead and import use params from next/navigation, and also import use memo from React, just like that. And then just write const use conversation. It's a very simple arrow function. And write const params is equal use params, like this, and const conversation ID is equal use memo. And just write the dependency array at the bottom like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to search for conversation ID inside of these parameters. So if there is no params $.conversation ID, we're going to return an empty string. Otherwise, we're going to return params.conversation ID as a string like that. And make sure you add params $.conversation ID in the dependency array. Then next we're going to write const is open, which is going to be a use memo again, write an arrow function, and we're just going to put double exclamation point conversation ID and just put conversation ID in the dependency array of this use memo. So this double exclamation point turns this string into a boolean. So now we can see that is open is a type of boolean, because if we don't do this, we can technically just do this, but then our is open is a type of string, but we want to use it as a boolean. So make sure you don't accidentally put just one exclamation point. This is going to turn it into a falsy string. Make sure you put 2 exclamation points. This turns it into a proper boolean. Great. And in the end, what you want to do is return use memo again, write an arrow function, open a parenthesis, and return an immediate object with is open and conversation ID. and in the dependency array, put is open and conversation ID. So our results are now memoized. And export default use conversation like that. Perfect. And now that we have this hook ready, we can move on and create another hook called use routes. So in the file, create use routes.ts like this. And in this use routes, you're going to import use memo from React, and you're going to import use params from next/navigation. And to continue, we have to install a package. So I'm going to go into my terminal right here. I'm going to shut down the application and I'm going to run npm install react-icons. So I'm going to expand just a little bit like this. So npm install react-icons and wait a couple of seconds for this to install. Great. Now that this has been installed, you can go ahead and run npm run dev again and just refresh your localhost so everything is working correctly. Great. I'm going to collapse this and I'm going to continue with my imports. So I'm going to import hi chat from react-icons/hi. I'm also going to import hi arrow left on rectangle from react-icons/hi2 like this. So make sure you do not import this from hi because it is not going to work. And besides importing this hi arrow left on rectangle, I'm also going to import another icon here from this very same package called hi users like that. Great. I'm also going to import the sign out from next-out/react, and I'm going to import use conversation from /use conversation, which we just created. They are in the same folder, so we can use this shorthand like this. Great. Now let's write const use routes, which is a hook, and just an empty return for now. Now let's add the path name. So const path name is equal use path name, and you can import path name from next/navigation. My apologies, we're not going to need use params at all, so you can remove them. We're just going to use path name from next/navigations. Great. All right. And below that, we're going to extract conversation ID from use conversation like this, if it exists. Great. And now we're going to write our routes. So const routes is equal to use memo, and we're going to return an array of objects. So the first route we're going to have is a label chat like this with an href of /conversations like this, and an icon of hi chat, and active path name /conversations, or if there is a conversation ID like this. So the same thing, double exclamation points, conversation ID. All right. And make sure you also add the dependency array of path name and conversation ID like this. Great. So this is our first route, and we're going to have two more routes. So the other one is label users with an href of /users, icon of hi users, and active of path name is identical to /users like this. We don't have to check for conversation ID because in the users route, we cannot have that to happen. Great. And the last thing we're going to have is the logout. So label logout href. Actually, yeah, href is going to be just an empty hash because we are going to use on click here, which is going to be an arrow function, which is going to call sign out like this. Great. And an icon is going to be hi arrow left on rectangle like this. Perfect. And all we're going to return is routes. So this memoized function which we just created. And make sure you export default use routes like this. Perfect. And now we can go back into our components sidebar, desktop sidebar component right here. And right here at the top, before we start writing our hooks, let's define this as use client like this. And now let's write const routes is equal use routes. Sorry, not use router, use routes from @app/hooks/use routes. Again, if you cannot use the @ you can use the .. abbreviation and find where your hooks are. Great. And below that, we're going to create is open and set is open and the use state of false like this. Great. We're going to use this later on in the tutorial, but I just want to prepare it here. So this is going to be used for our model, but we're not going to have that just now. All right, and inside of this div, we're going to start by styling it a little bit. So let's go ahead and write class name, hidden, lg fixed, lg inset dash y dash 0, lg left dash 0, lg z dash 40, lg w dash 20, xl px dash 6, lg overflow dash y dash auto, lg bg dash white, lg border dash r open square brackets 1 pixel, lg pb dash 4, lg flex, lg flex dash call, and justify dash between like this. All right, and now inside of that, we're going to create a nav element, and we're going to give it a couple of class names as well. So class name here is going to be empty dash 4 flex flex dash call and justify dash between like this. And inside of this nav bar, we're going to create a unordered list, and we're going to give it a couple of attributes here. So we're going to have it a role of list, so we are semantically correct with our elements, and we're going to give it a class name of flex flex dash call items dash center and space dash y dash 1 like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to map over our routes. You can see how we already have this little box right here. You can see we have this border. So this is our sidebar right here. Great. What we're going to do here is we're going to map over our routes from use routes, and we're going to have to create a special component for that. So for now, what you're going to do is routes.map item, and you can immediately return desktop item like this. If you save, of course, you're going to get an error because desktop item does not exist yet, but I'm just going to continue and give it some attributes. So key is item.label, href is item.href, label is item.label, same as the key value, icon is item.icon, active is item.active, and onClick is item.onClick like this. Great. And now we have to create the desktop item. So in the same folder, sidebar inside of our components, create a new file, desktop item.tsx, like this. Let's just fix the error. So desktop item, and I'm just going to return a div saying desktop item like this. And you can go back into your desktop sidebar and just import this. They're in the same folder, so you can just easily import it like this. And you can see we have desktop item repeating 3 times. That's because we have 3 routes in our use routes right here. So chat, users, and logout that are going to turn here later. So go back into your newly created desktop item right here, and let's add some imports. So first, I want to mark this as use client, and then we're going to give it an import of clsx from clsx and import link from next/link like this. Great. Now let's write the interface. So interface desktop item props, label, which is a string, icon, which is any, href, which is a string, onClick, which is optional, and it is just an empty void like this, and active, which is an optional boolean like this. Now you can just assign these props. So react-fc desktop item props like this. And let's just extract all of these values. So label, icon, href, onClick, and active. Great. So we imported these 2 things, we marked it as use client, and we defined the interface for our desktop item. Great. Now let's write our handle click function. So const handle click is a very simple arrow function, which is going to check if onClick exists. And if that's true, all it's going to do is return onClick. Very simple. Great. And now we can go ahead and actually style our desktop item. So instead of returning a div, we're going to return a list item like this. So we're going to give the list item an onClick of handle click like this. And inside, we're going to use the next link, which we imported at the top like this. Great. Let's go ahead and inside of this link, I'm going to create a span and I'm going to say label inside of that. So we rendered that very same label. And if I refresh now, okay, I get an error because the link does not have an href. So just make sure you add href to the link like this. Go ahead and refresh. And there we go. We have chat, users, and logout now. All right. And just above this label, I also want to give it an icon. So we're going to use this icon right here. In order to do that, we have to remap this icon to capital icon like this. All right. And now we can use it right here as icon. Great. And I'm going to give it a class name of h-6w-6 and shrink-0. Great. And if you save, you can see that we now have our icons. Great. Now let's go ahead and I'm just going to collapse this because we're going to give this link a couple of styles. So right, class name is CLSX. Again, you can use normal annotations here, but because I'm going to write this in multiple lines, I'm going to use backticks so I can safely do that. All right. So I'm going to write group flex gap -x-3 rounded -md p-3 text-sm leading -6 font-semi-bold text-gray -500 hover text-black and hover bg-gray -100 like this. And I'm gonna give it a comma here so I can create a dynamic style active and end bg-gray -100 text-black like this. All right. And now what I want to do is I want to hide this span and leave it only in server side. So I'm going to write class name sr-only like this. This is going to hide this on the client and only leave it available for our server side rendering, so we have better SEO because our navigation will actually have the name. Great job. And you can see we have our little routes here, and you can see how our users are automatically selected because we are on /users, and we can again log out using this button. All right, and you can see how I logged out now, and I'm gonna log in back again. And I can see my sidebar back here. Great job. Now, if we try and collapse this, you can see that on mobile it looks quite empty. So this sidebar only works well on desktop. Let's go ahead and let's fix that by adding a mobile footer. So I'm gonna stretch this just as much as I can so I can still visibly see this. And now I'm gonna go back into my sidebar component, where we added the desktop sidebar, and just below that I'm going to add mobile footer like this. And of course, if we save, we're going to get an error. So let's go back into our sidebar folder and create a new file, mobile footer.tsx like this. Let's just mark it as use client so we don't forget later. And let's just fix the error, mobile footer like this, create a div, mobile footer like that. And let's go back into our sidebar where the error is, and let's just import it the same way we did with the desktop sidebar. And now the error should go away. You can see how our text is kind of trying to be seen here. Don't worry, we're going to position this correctly in a moment. All right, let's go back into our mobile footer right here. And first let's add const routes, use routes, which you can import from add/app hooks use routes. It is the same one we use in the desktop sidebar as well. And then we're also going to use the use conversation. So const use conversation, which you can also import from add/app hooks use conversation. And we're going to extract is open because we return it separately. Great. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the mobile footer if the user has an active conversation going on. So if is open, I'm going to return null. This is because on the bottom, we only want the user to have the message form and not the mobile footer. Great. And otherwise, we can continue and style this. So I'm going to remove this mobile footer like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this div a couple of class names. So fixed, justify dash between, w dash full, bottom dash 0, z dash 40, flex, items dash center, bg dash white, border dash t, square brackets 1 pixel, and lg hidden like this. All right, and I'm just gonna collapse this now so we can actually, right now we still cannot see anything, but I'm gonna start collapsing it so we can actually see the changes we are doing here. Great. All right, now in here I'm gonna do routes.map the same way we did in the desktop sidebar. Route, and instead of rendering a desktop item, this time we're gonna render mobile item like this. Again, if you save this, you're gonna get an error because mobile item does not exist. But before we fix that, let's just give it all the attributes we need. So we're gonna use route.href, or you can use route.label like we did in the desktop item. Both are unique. Href is gonna be route.href. Active is gonna be route.active. Icon is gonna be route.icon. And onClick is gonna be route.onClick like this. And I'm going to save and I'm going to get my error. Now I'm gonna go back into my components sidebar and I'm gonna create a new file, mobile item.tsx like this. Great. And in this mobile item, let's first just quickly fix the error. So mobile item, div mobile item like that. And let's go back into mobile footer now where the error is. And let's just import this. They're in the same folder, very simple to import. And just save the file and the error should go away. And you can see, I'm going to zoom in. You can see how here I have mobile item 1, mobile item 2, and mobile item 3. Great job. All right. Now let's go back into mobile item right here. And the first thing I want to do is mark this as use client at the top. And I'm going to import link from next/link. And I'm going to import CLSX from CLSX like we did in the desktop item. Great. Now let's write the interface, mobile item props. And it's going to be pretty much the same. Href, a type of a string, icon, a type of any, active, an optional boolean, and onClick, an optional empty void function like that. And let's just assign these props here. So react-fc, mobile item props. Great. Okay, make sure you do not misspell it. Oh, I said mobile items, so the correct is mobile item, a singular item like that. So mobile item props and mobile item props here. Now let's just extract all of this. So href, icon, active, and onClick. Perfect. All right, now let's write our handle click the same way we did in the desktop item. So const handle click, a very simple arrow function which checks if onClick exists, and in that case just returns onClick like that. Make sure you do not put the wrong brackets here like I did, like that. Perfect. And now let's actually go ahead and style this. So instead of returning a div, we're going to return a link component here. Let's give it an href of href, so we immediately fix that error if it happens. All right, and inside of that link, I'm gonna give it an icon like this. Now we get an error because this icon does not exist. That's because we have to remap it to capital icon in the props the same way we did with a desktop item like that. Great. And now at the bottom, you can see I have 3 little icons. I'm gonna zoom in so you can see them. So we have 3 little icons here. Great. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a couple of attributes to this link right here. So I'm gonna give it an onClick. I'm gonna give it an href. Okay, we already have the href. Let's start giving it some class names. So class name is also gonna be CLSX. Same rules apply. You can use the normal annotations. For the sake of the tutorial, I'm gonna use backticks so I can write them in multiple lines. So group, flex, gap-x-3, text-sm, leading-6, font-semi-bold, w-full, justify-center, p-4, text-gray-500, hover, text-black, hover bg gray 100 like this. Okay, I can zoom out a bit now. They're starting to get too big. And I'm just going to write a comma at the end of this string of the CLSX, and I'm going to give it a conditional active and end bg-gray-100 and text-black like this. And you can see how it now selected our users. Great. And I'm going to give this icon a class name of h-6 and w-6 like that. And now the icons are a bit larger. Great. Now we have our mobile footer, but if I expand the screen enough, you can see how we also have the desktop sidebar. Great job. And you can test to see if the logout works on mobile as well. So I just clicked here and there we go. I am logged out. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to click sign in. And you can see that now I am both our desktop logout works and our mobile logout works as well. Great job. I'm going to zoom out a bit so we work in the desktop mode from now on. So just to recap everything we've done here, we did a lot of work. So first things first, we created this users layout page and layout and page. Make sure you do not accidentally put use client in this users page because that causes an error. We created this empty state component right here, which we use when nothing is selected. Besides that, we also have the layout. We fixed this sidebar error because it is returning a promise, which is not something that React is used to. We created the actual sidebar component, which renders desktop sidebar and mobile sidebar depending on the resolution of our screen. We created two hooks. Use conversation, which handles our active conversation, which you will see in the future. Right now it doesn't make much sense, but it's all going to make sense in the future. And we also have the use routes hook, which the only reason we created them in a hook is because we want to dynamically change their active status depending on the current route or if conversation ID is open or not. Great job. So we're going to continue now, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to fetch the current user which is logged in so we can display a little avatar here at the bottom. In order to do that, first we have to define some actions here. So I'm going to close everything here and I'm going to create a new folder inside our app called actions. My bad, it wasn't focused on this window. Actions like that. And inside I'm going to create a new action, get session.ts like this. It's going to be a very simple action. We're going to import get server session from next-out, and we're going to import out options from /API/out/square brackets our .next-out/route. So if you remember what this is, it's our that is our app folder API out next out route. And what are these out options? Well, it's this thing we exported here. If you remember, I explicitly said that we're going to need to export these constant out options, which at the bottom we use in the handler here. So just make sure you separately export these out options from here and you will have no problem importing it just like this. So just go ahead and locate your out options from here. Great. And a very simple action, export default async function get session. And all it's going to do is return await get server session, and you're going to pass in the out options like this. Perfect. And now that we have this get session, we can actually create another action called get current user.ts like this. This one is going to be a tad more complicated. So first import Prisma from @/app/libs/prisma-db. Then below that import get session from ./get session because they are in the same folder of actions. Great. Now write, now write const get current user asynchronous function. Open a try and catch block. So let's just fix the catch first. So if there is an error, which is a type of any, all you want to do in the action is return null. We don't want to throw any errors because that's going to break the application. This is not an API route, this is a server action. All right, now inside of here, first let's get our session. So const session is equal await get session like that. So the only reason we separated this get session is so we don't have to write this every single time. So we don't have to import auth options and then pass it to get server session. Simply we can do this once and then use it in the actions as we need it. Great. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to check if the current session exists. So if there is no session (user) (email), in that case, I'm just going to return null, no current user found. Otherwise, let's go and search for the current user using that email. So const current user is equal to await prisma.user.findUnique, where email is equal to session.user.email as string, just like that. Great. And now we're going to check if the current user exists. So if there is no current user, we're just going to return null like this. Otherwise, return current user like that. Perfect. And now we can go back into our sidebar component. So go into app components sidebar folder and pick the main sidebar.tsx right here. And remember, we made this as an asynchronous function, which means that we can await a get current user in here. So what I'm going to do is write const current user is equal await get current user. Like this. Let's just go back into our get current user to see if we exported. We did not. So in this get current user, just make sure you do export default get current user at the bottom like that. So inside get current user, just ensure that you export default. Now go back into sidebar and it should automatically create an import for you like this from @app/actions/get current user. Perfect. And now we have this current user right here, and I want to do is I want to pass it to desktop sidebar. So I'm going to write current user like this. And inside desktop sidebar, we have to define props that can accept the current user. So go ahead and write interface desktop sidebar props. Current user is a type of user which you can import from @prisma/client. This is generated because you run npx prisma db push and npx prisma generate and all of those commands which have been run by Prisma command line interfaces. So it's exactly as you defined in your schema. We have ID, name, email verified, image, hashed password, everything we defined in our schema. Great. And now let's assign these props here. So react-fc desktop sidebar props, and let's just extract the current user like this. Perfect. And what I'm going to do now in this client component, I'm just going to console log the current user so we can go ahead and see it. So I'm going to collapse everything here so I can open my sidebar here, and I'm going to refresh one more time, and you can see that we have the current user. Perfect. But one thing that you're going to notice right now, if you look into your terminal, you will find not exactly an error, but a warning, which will say that you are passing date objects in the client component. So in order to fix that, what you can do is you can install a certain plugin as an npm package. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go back into my terminal again. I'm going to shut down the application, and I'm going to run npm install next-superjson-plugin. Wait a couple of seconds for this to install. Great, now that it's here, do not start the application yet. Before you do that, go back into your next.config.js right here. And inside, what you're going to do, just below this app there, you're going to add svc plugins. You're going to open an array, and inside that array, you're going to open another array and write next-superjson-plugin. You're going to add a second parameter here, which is just an empty object like this. Great. And now go ahead and run your application again. So npm run dev again. And I'm going to close the terminal for now. And I'm just going to refresh everything here. What this SuperJSON plugin does is it sanitizes our objects so that we can safely pass them, even though they have date objects and other complex properties which are not compatible when passing from server components like sidebar into a client component like desktop sidebar, for example. So just wait a couple of seconds for this to initialize. Great. So I have my app up and running again, and now those terminal errors will not appear. This is something that happened in the Airbnb video, and we did a very complex way of fixing it, but thankfully there is this Next Super JSON plugin which now supports Next 13 and can fix that for you. All right. And now what I want to do is I want to go back into sidebar and just quickly fix this error by just adding a exclamation point at the end, so it's possible for the user to be null as well. Great job. Now let's go back into desktop sidebar, and we're going to start to develop our avatar. All right, so I'm going to close this right here, and I'm going to zoom out even more just so I can see the desktop version, because that's what we're going to be working with. All right, so right here at the bottom, where we define this navigation, below that, we're going to open another navigation right here, and we're going to give it a class name of empty-for flex-call justify-between and items-center, like this. And inside, what I'm going to do is open a div element, and I'm going to give it a couple of attributes. So first, I'm going to do onClick. I'm going to open an arrow function. I'm going to set is open to true. Where do we get this set is open? Well, we defined a little state here, which yet we do not use, but we're going to use it in the future to open the settings model, which we're also going to add, but that's for the future. All right, besides this onClick, we're also going to give it a couple of class names. So let's give it a cursor-pointer, hover, opacity-75, and transition, like this. Perfect. And what's gonna be inside is our avatar component, which we do not yet have, so we're gonna get an error, of course, but we're already gonna pass some properties here. So just write user is equal current user, like this. Save the file, and of course we're gonna get an error because avatar does not exist. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm just gonna close everything here, and I'm also going to collapse everything. So go into your app, into components, and create a new file, avatar.psx, like this. I'm going to quickly fix the error. So I'm going to write avatar div, like this. And I'm going to go back into my sidebar, into desktop sidebar right here. And I'm just going to import the avatar from /avatar, like this. And I'm just going to reorder my imports a little bit so they look nicer. All right. So import avatar from /avatar in the desktop sidebar component. So here at the bottom, you do not have this error. Great. We still have an error because of the types, but don't worry, we're going to fix that in a second. If you look closely, you can now see this avatar little button, avatar text at the bottom of my sidebar navigation. We're going to turn that into an image now. All right. So what we have to do now is define this avatar as a client component, because we're gonna, in the future, we're gonna use some hooks here, but that's we're not gonna do that now. We're gonna use that for an active status. All right, now let's write an interface for our avatar. So interface avatar props user from Prisma/client, like this. Let's assign these props avatar props, and let's extract our user, like this. Perfect. And now let's give this some class names. So the first div is going to have a class name of relative, like this. Now inside of that, we're going to create another div with the following class names. So class name is going to be relative inline-block rounded-full overflow-hidden h-9 w-9 md-h-11 and md-w-11, like this. All right. And what we're going to write inside of this is our image component. But before we do that, we have to add a placeholder image to our project. In order to do that, you can either Google placeholder in Google, or you can go into my repository, into public, into images, and find placeholder.jpg. And you can just save the image. And you're going to drag and drop it in your project in public images file right here. So I'm going to drop it the same way we did with logo, and make sure you rename it placeholder, like this, so it doesn't have any numbers in it. Perfect. All right. Now I'm going to go back into my avatar component, which we started working on, and let's actually add the image. So we're going to use next image. So image, which you can import from next/image, just like this. It's a self-closing tag, and let's give it an alt of avatar. Let's give it a source of user ?.image pipe /images/placeholder.jpg, like this. And I made a typo here, it's .image, like this. Perfect. And make sure you use the fill attribute as well. And now I'm going to save the file, and you can see that I have this empty placeholder image right here. Now, there is a chance you might have gotten an error here. I'm going to demonstrate that now. So I'm going to purposely log out now, and I'm going to log in using my GitHub or my Google account just to show you what happens. All right, so we have some errors because I need to clean my users. So just a second, let me resolve this in my database. All right, so I logged in with my Google account, and you can see that I have this error, invalid source prop. That is because whenever we use next image, we need to define where the image comes from. In order to fix this, we have to go back into our next config, so next.config.js, the same place where we added the super.json plugin, and just outside this experimental object, I'm going to add images, open an object, write domains, open an array, and we're going to resolve a couple of them. So first we're going to resolve res.cloudinary.com. Then we're going to resolve avatars.github.usercontent.com. And lastly, lh3.googleusercontent.com. If you're not sure what this is written here, you can actually just copy this, whatever the error says, you can just copy it and paste it in your images domains like this. Great. And now I'm just going to refresh everything to see if this has been resolved in just a moment. Great. And now you can see that I'm using my Google image here, which was automatically pulled from my login. Perfect. So if that happens to you, just make sure you add this to your images right here. And now I'm just going to wrap up my avatar component. So I'm going to go back into avatar right here. So you saw how it looks when we use the placeholder. Now you see how it looks when we use the user image. And one more thing I'm going to add here is for now, I'm going to hard code this active status for us. Later on, we're going to make it dynamic depending whether the user is actually active in the messenger. So just write a span element here. And it can actually be a self-closing tag like this. And let's just give it a couple of class names. So class name is going to have an absolute position, block, rounded dash full, bg dash green dash 500, ring dash 2, ring dash white, top dash 0, right dash 0, h dash 2, w dash 2, md, h dash 3, and md w-3 as well. And now, after this hot reloads, you can see that I have a nice little green dot on my avatar, and you should have it here as well. Perfect. You've finished passing the current user to the sidebar. You have a little avatar here. Great. We are ready to start working on the user list and start creating some conversations. So let's continue and let's create our users list in this white space right here. But before we go there, I just want to fix a typo I made in the last part. So go back in your next.config.js right here, and I misspelled Cloudinary. So just make sure it's res.cloudinary.com like that, and save the file. But don't worry, even if we misspelled something here, you are gonna get an error if you use an image from a host which is not in this images domains array. But you can fix that very easily by just copying the host from the error and pasting it here. But if you have the config like this, it should not happen in this tutorial. Great. So what we have to do now is create an action to get our users. So let's go into app folder, into actions, and create a new file, getUsers.ts. Inside, let's write the following. Let's import Prisma from add/app/libs/prisma db, and let's import get session from /get session like that, because they are in the same folder actions. Great. So const get user is an asynchronous arrow function. First, we're gonna get the session, so const session is equal await get session like this, and then we're gonna check if we have the session. So if there is no session (user (email), in that case, we're gonna return an empty array. And now let's open our try and catch block right here. In the catch, let's first solve the error. So the error type is any, and we are going to return an empty array here as well. And now in the try, we're going to try and find all of the users, excluding our own user. Because in this list of users, we want to show all the people who use our messenger, but we have no reason to show ourselves here because we don't want to start a conversation with ourselves. So const user is equal to await prisma.user.find many. First, you're going to order by created at descending, so the newest users are at the top, and where is going to be a special query, capital not like this, open an object, email session.user.email like this. So what are we doing here? Well, first of all, let's rename user to users like this, so it's correct because this is an array of users. We're using find many. We're ordering all the users by newest using created at descending here. And this query, what it means is that we are finding every user where the email is not our current user. So that's the way we are going to eliminate our own user from the list of these users. And very simply, we can just return users at the end right here. Perfect. That is it for our get users action. And let's just rename this to get users. So const get users, and don't remember to export default get users at the bottom like this. Perfect. So now that we have this finished, let's go back, and I'm gonna close everything for now. And let's go into app folder, into our users folder, into layout.tsx. And since this is an asynchronous server component, we can call get users inside of here without need for an API call. So I'm gonna write const users is equal await get users from /actions/get users, just like this. Perfect. And we're going to pass these users to a new component called user list. And we're going to create that right here. So go ahead and write user list like this. And we're going to pass in items, users like this. And if you save, of course, we are going to get an error here. So I'm just going to refresh. So everything is up to date. And there we go. I got this error. You probably have the same error as well. So let's go ahead and let's go in our users folder, create a new folder called components. And inside of there, you're going to create a new file, userlist.tsx. And let's just quickly fix this. So name it user list like this. And I'm just going to return a div which says user list like this. Perfect. And now I can go back into users layout.tsx and I can import this from ./components/userlist and save the file. And in a couple of seconds, this should get fixed, and you can see how it says user list right here. Perfect. Now we have this TypeScript error, which we are going to fix very soon. So let's go back into our users list, and let's map this as use client right here at the top. Great. And now let's write the interface. So interface user list props is going to hold items, which is a type of array of users. So go ahead and import user from @prisma/client and just put a little array at the end, so that tells TypeScript, okay, this is an array of users. Perfect. Now let's just assign this, so React function component, and just put in user list props like this. And inside you can destructure items like this. Perfect. Great. Now, instead of writing this div, we're going to use some bit more semantically correct elements here. So go ahead and write aside like this, and you can close aside like that. Let's go ahead and give it some class names. So class name, fixed, inset -y-0, pb-20, LG PB-0, LG left-20, LG W-80, LG block, overflow-y-auto, border-r, border-gray-200, block, W-full, and left-0, like that. Perfect. Now inside of here, we're gonna create a new div like this. We're gonna give this a class name of px-5, like that. And inside of that div, we're gonna create another div with a class name of flex-call. Perfect. And let's create another div inside with the following class names. So we're gonna give it text-2xl, font-bold, text-neutral-800, and py-4. And we're gonna write people. Or you can write users, whatever you like, but I think people looks just fine. Great. Alright, and your people should look like this. So it should have a bit of a padding and it should have this bold font right here. Perfect. And now just below this div right here, we're gonna create an iteration over these items, and we're gonna create another component called user box. So just make sure outside of this div, you're gonna create items.map item, and you can immediately return user box like this. And before I save the file, I'm just gonna write key item.id, and data is going to be item like this. And once I save, I'm going to get an error because user box does not exist. All right, so let's open our users folder components again and create a new file, userbox.tsx, like this. Let's map this as use client right here, and let's just quickly fix the error. So user box like this, and I'm just gonna say user like that. Let's go back into our user list and just import this newly created user box at the top, /user box like that. And once you save the file, the error should go away, and you can see I have a single user, which is not mine user. If you're not seeing any users here, that means you have not created any additional accounts. So in order to do that, just log out for now, and you should be greeted with our registration screen, and just click create an account and just make sure you create another one. So this is going to be called newmail.com 123321, and press register, and you're gonna have another user in your database beside the one you were just using. And you can see now I have 2 users here, excluding my user that I am logged in as. So just make sure you do that, otherwise you're not going to be able to see any users because we exclude our own user from the get users action. Great, now let's go back into user box right here and let's write an interface for it. So interface user box props. Data is going to be a type of user, which you can import from @prisma/client, just like this. And let's just assign these props. So user box props like this, and you can extract data like that. Perfect. What I want to do now is I'm going to add a router, I'm going to add some states and some on-click functions here. So first let's add our router. So const router is equal use router from next/navigation like that. Const is loading, set is loading, is going to be use state false. We're going to use this later, but I just want to prepare it right now, and you can import use state from React right here at the top. Great. Now let's add our handle click function here, which is going to point to an API call, which for now does not exist, but we're going to create that just after we finish this. So const handle click is a use callback function, so we can memorize it. Make sure you put the dependency array right here, and you can import use callback from React the same way you did with use state. All right, first let's set the loading to true. To set is loading is going to be true. And after that, we're going to call Axios, which you can import from Axios like I did right here. And we're going to call a .post/API/conversations. And in the body, we're going to pass in user ID data.id. All right. So what does this mean? Well, we're going to initialize an Axios post call to a route which we do not have at the moment. It's going to be API/conversations, and in the body element, we're going to send the user ID that we are starting the conversation with. Right, so if I click on the first user, let's say the name is Antonio, I'm going to start a conversation with Antonio. All right, and now in the .then function right here, once I get the data, I'm already going to prepare this. What I'm going to do is router.push and open backticks like this, /conversations/ and just open this special object so you can write inside backticks data.data.id like this, which is going to exist in the future. And finally, you can just say set is loading to false like this. And in the dependency array, make sure you put data and router like that. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and actually style our user box right here. So instead of this div like this, we're going to add an onClick, which is going to call handle click like this, which we just defined. And let's add some class names here. So the class names we are going to have are w-full relative flex items-center space -x-3 bg-white p-3 hover bg-neutral -100 rounded-lg transition and cursor -pointer like that. Great. And inside of this, first we're going to add our avatar component, which we created while we were working on the sidebar. And you can import avatar from @/app/components/avatar. So it's in the root of the components file. It is not in the user's components. It's in these global components we have in the app folder right here. Great. And now that we have this, what we can actually do is we can pass the user as data like this, because our data prop right here, if you look at the user list, if you look at the items, those are the users. So we know that the data here is the actual user. So you can just pass in data here. And great, you can see how I already have these images and well, right now a hard-coded active status, which we're going to change in the future. But you can already see how good this looks already. Great. Below this avatar, create another div with a class name of min-w-0 flex-1 like that. And inside of that, we're going to create a class name of focus outline none like this. And inside of that, we're going to create a span with a class name of absolute-inset -0. So 2 separate classes. Actually, we don't need this at all, my bad. You can remove this span, and you can immediately go ahead and write a div with the following class names. So class name is going to be flex justify -between items -center mb-1 like that. And inside of that div, just open a paragraph right here and write the following class names. So we're going to have text-sm, font-medium, and text-gray-900. And inside of the paragraph, we're going to render data.name like this. Great. And now we have Antonio and Antonio Erdeles right here. So Antonio is the one I created using credentials, and this one with an image is the one I created using social login. And I'm going to open my network tab in here just for you to see how once I click on it, it's going to call something. So once I click here, you can see that it tried to call /conversations, but since it does not exist, we get a 404. So that is completely expected. Don't worry about that for now. And while we are here, you can actually see how this looks on mobile as well. So we have a list of people, which takes the entire screen, which is what we want in our design. Great job. You finished the people page. Now we're going to start working on the conversation page. So let's continue and let's create an API route to create our conversations. So let's open our sidebar, and I'm going to collapse everything here. I'm going to go into the app folder, into the API folder, and I'm going to create a new folder called conversations, like that. And in the root of that folder, I'm going to create a new file called route.ts, like that. First, I'm going to import get current user from @/app/actions get current user, like this. Then I'm going to import next response from next/server. I'm going to import Prisma from add/app/libs/prisma-db, and I'm going to, well, that's it for our imports for now. What we're going to do next is we're going to create our post function for this route. So go ahead and write export async function post, which accepts the request, which is the type of request. Open this function, and first let's open a try and a catch block right here. So the error type is any, like this. And what we're going to do in the catch block is return new next response internal error with a status of 500, like this. All right, and now we can go back into our try route right here. So first, let's get the current user. Const current user is equal to await get current user. Below that, we're going to parse our body. So const body is equal to await request.json, like this. Now we're going to extract all of the possible values from our body. So const open an array, say equal body, like this. And now inside of this array, we're going to destructure all of the possible properties which we can send when creating a new conversation. So far what we know is from user box. Once we click on the user box, we know that one of the fields we will definitely have is a user ID, and that is for creating a single one-to-one conversation. But our conversation route is also going to be able to handle group chats. So that's why we're going to have a bit more elements in this body that you might think, where did they come from? Well, I'm just preparing for the future because we're going to need all of those values. So first one is user ID. We know that from the user box. Below that, we're going to have an option is group, which is a Boolean. Below that, we're going to have members, and we're going to have a name. So user ID is needed if we are creating a one-on-one conversation, but if we are creating a group, we're also going to need members, and we're going to need the name of that group chat. Because if we only use the user ID, in that case, the name of the chat is going to be, well, different for every user. For me, it's going to be Antonio. For Antonio, it's going to be whatever the name is that I have in my account. All right. Now let's write an if clause to check if we have the current user. So if there is no current user (.id), or if there is no current user (.email), in that case, we can return new next response unauthorized with a status of 401, like this. Great. Below that, we're going to check if we sent is group true, but we have not sent members, or we have not sent name. So if is group and open parenthesis, if there is no members at all, or if members.length is less than 2, or if there is no name, in that case, we're going to return new next response invalid data with a status of 400. Great. So if we send is group to true, and if there are no members sent, or there is not enough number of members to create a group chat, or if there is no name, we're going to send an error invalid data. Great. All right. And now let's create the code to create a group chat if is group is present. So open an if clause, if is group, like this, and inside we're going to create a new conversation. So const new conversation is equal to await prisma.conversation.create. Inside, I'm just going to expand my code a little bit. So this collapsed to mobile view for me, don't worry. What I'm going to do inside this create is write some data. So first I'm going to pass in the name for the group chat. I'm going to pass in the isGroup boolean. And for the users, we're going to immediately connect them using Prisma. So connect, open an array, and inside we're going to spread members.map member, which is going to have a type of value string like this, and open an arrow function inside, and open and return an immediate object here with an ID of member.value like this. And below that, add another object with an ID of current user.id. All right, so we have this connect array right here, which separately adds the current user to the group of members. Because when we create a group chat, again, we're not going to send our own ID there, because we're going to filter out our user from the list of possible users to add in a group chat. So that's why we need to separately add our user to the group as well if we are the one creating a group chat. And what this function does right here is it iterates over the array of members which we passed, which are going to have a value object inside of them, which is going to serve as an ID. And we're going to use the ID to connect our users. Great job. So now we have this new conversation right here, and just below this data, I'm also going to add a comma and write include users true. What include users does is it populates the users when we fetch the conversation. So by default, when you get a new conversation, you're not going to get an array of objects of your users inside of that group chat. You're only going to get IDs. But if you want to work with those users, for example, display their image or display their name, you need to populate them. And in Prisma, we do that using include the field we want to populate and true like this. Perfect. And now that we have this new conversation right here, all we have to do is write return next response.json new conversation. Great. So we finished our group chat logic here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to handle a single one-to-one conversation creation. It's going to be a bit different from group chat, because if you notice, when we create a group chat, we don't check if an existing group chat exists with those exact members, because we do not care. People can create as many group chats as they want with the exact same members if they want to. But for single one-to-one conversations, we have to check if there is an existing conversation with that user. So what we're going to do is write const existing conversation is equal to await prisma.conversation.findMany. Now, why do I use find many and not find unique? Well, because we're going to use a special query which only is supported in find many, unfortunately. But that does not prevent us from not being able to do what we want, because all right, we're just gonna get an array and then we're gonna have to extract the first one from the array. So to be more correct, we can name this existing conversations like this, because it's multiple of them. Even though it's gonna be only one inside of the array, I just want to follow the semantics because this is going to be an array of conversations. Great. And what I'm gonna write inside is a where query right here, and inside of there we're going to write a capitalized OR, and the capitalized OR is going to have an array inside. So just open that array like this, open an object, and you're going to write user IDs. You're going to write another object inside of that equals to current user.id comma user ID like this. And we're going to create another object exactly like this inside of this OR array. So open another object inside and write user IDs again equals again user ID current user.id. Now, I'm not exactly sure if we have to do this, but I did encounter some errors where I had an existing conversation, but for some reason another one was created. So this just covers all of those cases. Great. So what we do is we look throughout all of the conversations that exist, we search for the user IDs field, and we are going to find if there is a conversation which has only these two users. So the user that we are currently logged in as and the user that we are trying to start a new conversation with. If it already exists, we are not going to create a new one for them. Great, so now that we have these existing conversations right here, let's extract the only existing one like this. So const single conversation is equal to existing conversations, which we have from right here. Just open an array and pick the first one inside, like this. And then you can safely write if there is a single conversation. In that case, we can return the very same conversation back to the user instead of creating a new one. So return next response.json single conversation, like that. Perfect. And now we're going to handle creating a new conversation if this query does not exist. So just below this, I'm going to write const new conversation is equal to await prisma.conversation.create, like this. And for the data, I'm going to give it a users object, and I'm going to again connect the users we are using. So the first user we're going to connect is of ID current user.id, which is ourselves, and the second user we're going to connect in this conversation is the user ID, which we pressed from the user box right here. And also just below this data object, we are going to write include users true, because we need them, because we're going to use them in our UI. So that's why in here, for example, we did not need to include those users, because we don't want to do hard on our database queries if there is no need to. But in this case, we do need our users, so that's why we're going to include them. Perfect. And right here at the bottom, all you're going to write is return next response.json new conversation, like that. Perfect. Now that we have this saved, what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this window, and I'm going to open my network tab one more time. If you remember, previously I got a 404 error for my /API/conversations route. And I'm also going to prepare my database here. So you can see my conversations are completely empty right now. I don't have a single conversation. But once I click on Antonio, it should create a new conversation. So let's see if that works. And it does. And we are redirected to /conversations/conversation ID. But we get a 404 here because we did not create a UI route for that. But that's completely fine. Let's go back into our database and let's click refresh in our conversations to see if we created a new one. And we did. And you can see that it has two users inside. One of them is the user I'm logged in with, and the other one is the one I clicked in the user box. In my case, it's Antonio. Great job. And just to get rid of this error, you can go to /users back here, so you don't have this ugly error here. Great. And now that we have this existing conversation, try and click again on the very same user. What should happen is you will be immediately redirected to an existing conversation. And if I click refresh right here, I should not have two conversations. Great, I only have the exact same one because it has already been created. So we are not going to create a new one if there is no need to do that. Great. So again, just go back to /users so you don't have this error. And in the next part, we're going to create our /conversations so we don't get that ugly 404 page. Great job. So let's continue and let's create our /conversations route, which will be triggered once we click on this chat icon right here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to close everything for now. I'm going to expand this window a little bit. And inside my app folder, I'm going to create a new folder called conversations, like that. And inside of there, I'm going to create a new file, page.tsx, like this. I'm going to mark this as use client. I'm going to import CLSX from CLSX, and I'm going to import use conversation from /hooks use conversation. We created this when we were creating our sidebar because we needed to use it in our use routes. So this is how it looks like if in case you forgot. Alright, now that we have this, we're also going to import empty state from /components/empty state. And that is this select chat or start a new conversation box right here. So we're going to reuse it the same way we did for the user list right here. Great, and I'm going to write const home. It is a very simple arrow function. And first we're going to extract is open from use conversation like this. And then we're going to return a div like this. And inside we're going to put empty state like that. And we're going to export default home just like this. Perfect. So now when I click on /conversations or on the chat right here, you can see that I'm right here and it looks a bit weird, but don't worry, we are going to fix that. Now in this div right here, open class name and make sure it's CLSX like this. In the first argument, I'm gonna write LG PL-80 H-full and LG block like this. And for the second argument, I'm gonna use isOpen conditional to trigger either between block or hidden like this. Perfect. So now it fits the style of our users list. Great. So basically what's going to happen once I collapse, as you can see, it's going to remove dynamically. And also some other things are going to happen once we implement the actual conversation view, where you will see this is open in full effect. Perfect. So now that we've done that, we have to go and create our layout for conversations. So go ahead and write layout.tsx like this. And you get an error because there is no default export here right now. So go ahead and write export default asynchronous function conversations layout like this. And the prop is going to take its children, and you can immediately create types for that. So children is a type of React node. Perfect. So go ahead and open this. And first thing we're going to get, well, we're just going to return for now the sidebar like this, which you can import from /components /sidebar component. We already did this for the users. And inside what we're going to do is we're going to create a div with a class name of H-full like this. And inside we're just gonna paste our children like this. And I will save this layout and it will automatically hot reload. You can also manually refresh if it doesn't do that for you. And now you can see that I have my sidebar here as well. And now we have this error right here for the sidebar, and you can fix that exactly the same way you did with the user list. So ts-expect-error server component just like this. Perfect. And what we have to add now is another component called conversation list. So I got an error here. I think it's just cache. Okay, let me see what's going on here. Alright, so I had an error with cache. If your screen did not fill this entire, if your empty state did not fill this entire screen under conversations and you got that same error that I did, all you have to do is shut down your application and run npm run dev again. So it's a simple cache issue, nothing too complicated to fix. Great. So let's continue now and let's go back into layout, and below this h-full, I'm gonna write conversation list like this, and I'm gonna pass in initial items, which are going to be well, for now just an empty array like this. So just go ahead and save this and you're gonna get an error right here. So in order to fix this, what we have to do is we have to go in conversations and create a new folder called components like that, and inside of that create a new file called conversationlist.tsx like this. And let's just quickly fix the error. So conversation list div conversation list like this, and go back into your conversations layout and just import that component from ./components/conversation list, and the error should go away. And now we have to find a way to fill these initial items before we start and develop this conversation list. So in order to do that, let's create a new action in this actions folder called get conversations.ts like this. Great. Now let's import Prisma from add/app/lib/prisma-db like that. And let's import getCurrentUser from ./getCurrentUser because they are in the same folder right here. Let's write const getConversations, which is an asynchronous function. And first, let's get the current user. So const current user is equal to await get current user, like that. If there is no current user, $.id, in that case, just return an empty array. Now let's open a try and catch block. The error type is any, and the same thing, just return an empty array if there is any error. Perfect. Now let's go into our try block right here and let's find the conversations. So const conversations is equal await prisma.conversation.find many. And in the query, first we're going to order them by last message at descending. What this means is that we're going to order our newly conversations by the latest message that has been sent in them. So we're not going to order them by newest, we're going to order them by latest active. So if a user sent a message in one of the conversations, that is going to be our most top conversation. All right, now another query we are going to do is where. And first things first, user IDs has current user.id. So we're going to load every single conversation that includes our current user. That includes single one-on-one conversations and group chats. So with this very simple query, we handled all of those cases. What we have to do now is populate some of the fields we have in the conversations model. So go ahead and write include users true. Now if you're wondering, how do you include something inside of the users or something inside of this property? Well, for example, we will want to include messages, so we can just write true. But I also want to populate the users inside of those messages. So what you can do is, instead of writing true, open an array inside like this, and again write include. And what we're going to include from the messages is sender and seen. Sender is the author of the message, and seen is an array of people who have seen the latest message. Perfect. You can close this and you can safely just return conversations like that. And just make sure you write export default use conversation, not use conversations, but get conversations, like this. So very simple action, and just remember to export default get conversations. Great. Now that that is done, we can go back into conversations layout.tsx right here. And now we can safely, since this is an asynchronous server component, we can now safely load the conversations here. So I'm going to write const conversations is equal to await get conversations from /actions/get conversations. It's at the top of my file right here. Perfect. And now that I have that, I'm going to pass that instead of an empty array right here. Perfect. And now we can go back into conversation list component and we can start developing here. So first thing I'm going to write is an interface for our conversation list. So I'm going to write conversation list props. I'm going to write initial items, which is going to be an array of conversation from Prisma client like this. And make sure you mark this as use client like that. And we're going to assign this right here like that. And then you can extract that as initial items like this. Why do we call this initial items? Well, because later in the tutorial, we're going to update these items in real time using pusher, which uses sockets underneath. So it's incorrect to name these items since they're going to just be used as an initial load for our messenger. But we are actually going to, sorry, I did something with my screen, but we are actually going to update those messages dynamically depending on the real-time sockets and pusher. All right, and now that we have this, what I want to show you real quick is if you go back into layout right here, you will see that the types we are sending to the initial items is not the same that we are receiving from our action. You can see that what I get from await get conversations has a scene, which is an array of users, and a sender, which is a user, as well as users, which is a user. But in our conversation list, initial items is just a simple conversation, and you can see that it uses user IDs instead. Now, you might get a TypeScript error for this. I'm not getting it right now, but I remember during development I definitely got this error. So I'm going to show you how to properly create types for this. So we're going to go and I'm going to collapse everything here, and inside the app folder create a new folder called types. And inside of that create a new file, index.ts, like this. And I'm going to import conversation, message, and user from @prisma/client like this. And now that we have this import, we can write a couple of special types for us. So export type full message type is equal to message, and sender, which is a type of user, and scene, which is an array of users like this. And we're also going to export type full conversation type, which is a type of conversation, and users, which is an array of user, and messages, which is a type of full message type like this. And now that we have this full conversation type, just make sure you save this file and make sure you've written export here. We can use this full conversation type inside of our newly created conversation list. So I don't want to use this conversation. I want to use full conversation type, and I'm going to import it from @/app/types. And then you can remove this just like that. And now I'm going to go back here and see, okay, so now I have this error, so I'm just going to quickly see what's going on here. Alright, so I made a small error, so let's go back into our types folder which we just created, and instead of a single full message type, we have to add an array here like this. And now if you go back to layout, you can see that what we send and what we expect is a full conversation type, and that is exactly matching, and you should not get any errors. So just to recap what I've done right here, so in conversation list right here, I've assigned a new type, full conversation type, and array at the end. And if we take a look at what full conversation type is, it uses the existing conversation, but it extends it to give types of populated user and populated messages. Why do we need that? Well, because in our get conversations, we use this include, which populates the users and populates the messages. So that's why the types were incompatible, so we have to manually resolve them. If you are still having errors, just confirm. You can also use my GitHub, which is in the description, that your types are exactly like this. Confirm that you're correctly adding the include right here. And in last resort, you can try and just reload your window like this. Sometimes TypeScript gets cached inside. But if you want to be 100% sure, you can hover your mouse over get conversations, and once it loads, it's going to show you what kind of type it is returning. So if I hover here, okay, it's still loading. Let's just wait a second. Great. So you can see that I'm returning a conversation and messages has scene and sender and users, and it's an array. And you can hover here to see what you're expecting to get. Perfect. Now let's go back in our conversation list. So I'm just going to find it right here. I'm going to close everything else. Great. Now in this conversation list, first things first, we're going to assign these initial items to a state. So go ahead and write const items set items is equal use state, which you can import from React, and just pass in initial items like this. Great. Below that, we're going to add const router is equal use router, and you can import router from next/navigation. Just make sure you do not accidentally import it from router. The correct is navigation like this. Perfect. Below that, we're going to use our use conversation hook, which we already used a couple of times. So const use conversation like this, which you can import from @/app/hooks use conversation right here. And you're going to destructure inside conversation ID and is open like that. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and we can start styling our conversation list. So instead of returning a div, we're going to use the semantically correct aside element like we did in the user list. Great. Now let's write some class names. So class name is going to be CLSX right here. And as always, you can use strings here, but I'm going to use backticks so I can safely write in multiple lines here. And make sure you import CLSX from CLSX. I'm going to put it to the top right here, and I'm going to quickly organize my stuff like this. Beautiful. All right, now inside of this CLSX, let's write some class names. So it's going to be fixed inset-y -y-0 pb-20 lg pb-0 lg left-20 lg w-80 lg block overflow-y-auto border-r border-gray-200 like this. And in the second argument of the CLSX, what I'm going to write is a conditional. So I'm going to use is open question mark hidden. Otherwise, I'm going to use block w-full left-0 like this. Perfect. So now you can see I have the exact same thing as we have in our users, except in the users we actually load the users, but we're going to do the very similar thing here for the conversations. Perfect. So inside of this aside element, create a new div like this and give it a class name of px-5 like that. Inside of there, we're going to create a new div with a class name of flex justify between mb-4 and pt-4 like that. Inside, create a new div and just write messages inside, and messages should now appear right here. Perfect. Now let's style this. So let's give it some styles, text-to-XL, font-bold, and text-neutral-800. So the same thing we did with users. Perfect. Now it looks very nice. All right, now below this div, I'm going to create another div, and inside I'm going to add a React icons icon. So I'm going to use md outline group add like this, and I'm going to import this right here at the top. So I'm going to import md outline group add from react-icons/md like this. Perfect. And now I'm going to save this, and you're probably I'm going to refresh this just to see if it's visible or not. So it's taking some time for me. There you can see a very small icon that has appeared in my corner. So as always, if your hop reload stops working, you can just manually refresh. Next 13 can be slow in development. It is still very experimental. All right, and now let's actually style this MD outline group add here. So first I want to give it a size of 20, so it looks a little bit bigger than this. And now let's go ahead and write some class names here. So class name is going to be rounded-full p-2 dg-gray-100 text-gray-600 cursor-pointer hover opacity-75 and transition like this. All right, I'm going to refresh one more time, and there we go. We have a nice little icon right here in the corner. Perfect, exactly what we wanted. So for now, this is not going to do anything. In the future, it's going to open a model to create a group chat. All right. And now just below this two divs right here, we're going to create an iteration over our items. So I'm going to write items.map item, and I'm going to immediately return a conversation box like this. Right now it does not exist, so of course if we save we are going to get an error, but I'm also going to populate it with some attributes here. So I'm going to give it a key of item.id, I'm going to give it data of item, and I'm going to give it a selected of conversation ID is equal to item.id like this. So that is why we needed this conversation ID from the use conversation route. Hook, sorry. Now if I save this file, we are going to get an error because our conversation box does not exist. So let's go ahead and create that. So let's go into our conversations components and create a new file, conversation box.tsx. Let's mark it as use client, and let's just quickly fix the error by writing conversation box like this and just return a div conversation box like that. Go back into your conversation list and just import this from /conversation box like this and save the file, and the error should go away. Just wait a couple of seconds and there we go. I have one instance of conversation. If you're not seeing anything, confirm that in your database you actually have a conversation. If you don't, make sure you have enough users in this user page right here, which I clicked on. Is just taking a couple of seconds to compile. And make sure you click on a conversation like this. So I just clicked on this Antonio Erdelez right here, and it's gonna give me a 404 because we do not have the individual conversation ID route yet. But if I go back to /conversations, I should have 2 conversations right now because I clicked on both users and I have conversations with both of them right now. Perfect. So I'm gonna go back into conversation box now. And I'm going to start adding some imports here. So first I'm going to import use callback and use memo from React. I'm going to import use router from next/navigation. I'm going to import conversation, message, and user from @prisma/client because we're going to need those individual types. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to install a new package which we are going to need. So go ahead and open your terminal. I'm going to shut down the application and I'm going to write npm install date-fns like this. Wait a couple of seconds for this to install. And after it's been installed, you can go ahead and npm run dev again and just refresh your page to make sure the app has been loaded. Great, so I have my app up and running again, and I'm gonna add the import from that package called format. So from date-fns like this. Great. And I'm also going to import use session from next-out/react like this. And I'm going to import clsx from clsx like that. Perfect. And what we're gonna do now is we're going to start and write types for this conversation box. So go ahead and write the interface conversation box props. Data is going to be full conversation type, which you can import from @/up/types, which we created just recently. And selected is going to be an optional boolean like this. Perfect. Now let's just assign these props right here. So conversation box props like that, and just destructure data and selected from here. Perfect. All right, now we're gonna have to create a hook which is going to help us to select the other user from the conversation. Because if you think about it, when we load our conversations, depending on which user is looking at them, we do not want to show the current user as the name of that conversation. We want to show the other user. So that is exactly what we are going to do now. So I'm going to open my navigation here, and inside the app folder, I'm going to create a new folder. We already have the folder called hooks, and inside I'm going to create a new file called useOtherUser.ts like that. So very explicit name, so we know what it is doing. I'm going to import use session from next-out/react like this. I'm going to import use memo from React. I'm going to import full conversation type from /types, and I'm going to import user from @prisma/client like that. So this is everything we are going to need for this hook. Then I'm going to write const useOtherUser. I'm going to give it a conversation of a full conversation type. I'm going to open an array. I'm going to open an object in which I'm going to write users, and I'm going to give it a type of user and an array like this. And I'm just going to open and return an arrow function for this hook. Perfect. And just make sure you immediately add export default use other user so you don't forget about it. All right, now first let's get our session. So const session is equal use session like this. And now let's write const other user is equal to use memo. Open an arrow function and give it a dependency array like this. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the current user email. To do that, I'm going to use a session. So const current user email is equal to session question mark dot data question mark dot user question mark dot email like that. And then I'm going to filter to the through the conversation users, and I'm going to filter out whatever is not my user using the email. So I'm going to write const other user is equal to conversation dot users dot filter. I'm going to find the user, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to write user.email is not equal to current user email like this. So I'm just going to expand this view like this so you can see. So const other user is equal to conversations dot users. We're going to filter through the users, and we are going to remove we are going to leave only the user which is not our current user. So that's how we find the other user, the opposite of the currently logged in one. And all we have to do is just write return other user like this. And in the dependency array, you're going to write session question mark dot data question mark dot user question mark dot email and conversation dot users like this. And what you're going to return from this hook is return other user like that. Perfect. So I'm just going to bring this back a bit, and now I can head back into my conversation box now that I have this new hook. Sorry, not conversation box. Yes, actually conversation box right here. And the hook I'm gonna use here is the newly created use other user. So const other user is equal use other user, and you can import it from @/app/hooks use other user. Perfect. And the argument it accepts is either conversation or an array of users, which we will use for group chats. But for now, we have this very simple case where we can just pass in the data like this. Next, we're gonna get our session. So const session is equal use session like this. And below that, const router is equal use router like this. Perfect. Now let's go ahead and write our handle click function. So const handle click is a use callback. Don't forget the dependency array right here. And all we're going to do is router.push use backticks /conversations / open the special object data.id. Very simple like this, and give it a dependency array of data.id and router like that. Perfect. And now we're going to write a couple of constants for the texts which we are going to use in our UI. So first, let's write a constant, a variable, which is going to be able to fetch the last message sent in the conversation. So const last message is equal to use memo, which we have imported from React already. Don't forget the dependency array. First, I'm going to get all messages. So const messages is going to be data.messages pipe empty array like this. And the way we can get the last message from this is very simple. So I'm going to return messages.length -1 like this. And in the dependency array, all I'm going to put is data.messages like this. Perfect. We have the logic to get the last message from the conversation. All right, now let's create a variable to fetch our user email. You already saw how we did that in use other user. So we're going to do a very similar thing, but we're going to memorize it because we're going to use it across our other variables in this component. So in the conversation box, make sure you write const user email is equal to use memo. Don't forget to put the dependency array as well. And what you're going to do is you're just going to return session.data ?user ?email like this. And in the dependency array, you're going to put the very same thing. So session.data ?user ?email like that. So now we have the user email. And now we're going to write the constant for our seen boolean. So we're going to create a control whether the user has seen this message already or not. So write const has seen is again use memo. Make sure you put the dependency array again, and in has seen, first we're gonna check if there even is an existing last message. So if there is no last message, return false, because it's not possible that we've seen a message that does not exist. Great, and now we're gonna fetch, not fetch, but we're gonna structure the seen array. So const seen array is gonna be equal to last message dot seen pipe empty array, just so we don't break something accidentally if dot seen does not exist by chance. All right, and now we're gonna do another check if there is no current user email. So if there is no user email, in that case, we will also going to return false, because we cannot compare the seen array with anything. So we need the user email to be loaded in order to compare whether it is in this seen